Hey friends, it's Corey from Hey Let's Make Stuff. In today's video, we're going to be talking about DTF printing again. Specifically, we're going to be talking about whether or not DTF printing in your home is safe. DTF printing has been taking this sort of at-home crafter world by storm. So many people are getting printers that they can use in their own homes. And if you've been listening to any of the conversation around this, there are a lot of people who are wondering if DTF printing is actually safe to be done in someone's home. There are a lot of safety concerns that I don't think we as an industry have been taking it seriously enough. And I'm going to put myself in that category. I traveled to Fargo, North Dakota to Heat Transfer Warehouse to learn how to use a DTF printer. And while I was there, I took some precautions, but honestly, I wish I had taken more. I have spoken with some professional DTF printers and some other people who have experience in this industry, and they have given me their precautions that they think that everybody should be taking. I will caveat this video by saying I am not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a safety engineer, I'm none of those things. However, I have been talking to people who are, so I'm hoping that this video will help sort of demystify what you should actually be doing if you are doing DTF printing at home. So with all of these safety concerns, why even try DTF printing? Well, the fact is, DTF printing is awesome. It is one of my new favorite technologies. I think that it is amazing when you compare it to something like HTV, even something like sublimation. And that's because you can use it on basically any colored garment with any fabric content. So with sublimation, you do need something that is polyester, you need something that is lighter in color, but with DTF, you can put a full color image on something like a dark colored t-shirt. This is 100% cotton, it's from Bella Canvas, and I was able to put this DTF print on there with absolutely no problem. DTF transfers allowed me to create projects quickly and easily. I mean, it's a 15-second press. It's so easy, and I really love the results. Despite the fact that this sort of sits on top of the fabric like HTV, this can last up to 50 to 100 washes if applied properly. DTF printing is awesome, and I do think that the technology is going to get better over the next few years as more and more people want to get into it. However, we really are still in the infancy of DTF printing, which means that there are things like safety concerns that we haven't dug into deeply quite enough yet. Let's start out by talking about pressing DTF transfers you've ordered from somewhere else at home. So maybe you go to Heat Transfer Warehouse's website, you order a custom DTF print, and then you press it at home with your heat press. The safety concerns here are not very much. Basically similar to sublimation, you just want to make sure that you're working in a well-ventilated area. So open a window, have a little fan blowing, maybe an air purifier, just something to get the air moving around, and that will really help with any sort of fumes that are sort of residual from the pressing. But now let's talk about if you have a DTF printer in your home. What makes DTF printing in your home unsafe? For any product that you plan on using for DTF printing, you can order their safety spec sheet. So it's basically going to be a PDF or some other document that will tell you exactly how safe this product is to use. That being said, just because something is certified safe and non-toxic doesn't mean you want to breathe it in. So for example, water is safe and non-toxic, but if you get it in your lungs, you're going to be really unhappy or worse. And just because something like the adhesive powder that we're using with DTF printing is free from formaldehyde, for example, it doesn't mean we want it coating our lungs. If you go on YouTube, you may find videos of people saying that they had all sorts of bad things happen to them because they were doing DTF printing at home and taking no precautions. And this includes things as bad as cancer. So let's err on the side of caution and really take a lot of precautions to make sure that we are doing DTF safely. The first thing we're going to talk about is ink. So DTF printers use solvent ink, which can release VOCs, or volatile organic compounds. And these VOCs can irritate our lungs, irritate our eyes, and even irritate our skin. A mask doesn't really work for these types of compounds, and that is because basically the particles are so small that they go basically directly through a mask. Your best friend here is going to be ventilation, which we're going to talk a little bit more about later in this video. The adhesive used in DTF printing is a thermoplastic polyurethane. So I'm just going to make that TPU for short because I don't want to have to say that a bunch of times. This is a microplastic. We see warnings about microplastics all the time, maybe on the news. There's microplastics in our oceans, there's microplastics in our food, there's even microplastics in our bodies. And it's really not good for us. And so we don't want to be adding any more of that through DTF printing. The effects of exposure to microplastics hasn't really been fully studied, especially in kids and pets. So this is one place that you're really going to want to take some precautions to make sure that that powder doesn't get everywhere. One of the folks I talked to talked about TPU powder being basically like sheetrock dust. So if you've ever done any sort of construction in your own home where you're using sheetrock, you know that that dust gets everywhere. It coats every surface, and it's really difficult to get rid of. And this TPU powder that we're using as an adhesive backing on our DTF prints is similar. This means that containing that TPU powder is sort of basically fully impossible, which means that you're going to want to take all the precautions that I'm talking about here to minimize the amount of that powder that makes it outside of the space where you're doing your DTF printing. And then the curing process, which basically melts that adhesive, is the third place where you're going to find some safety concerns when it comes to DTF printing. The curing process basically means that you're heating up that adhesive and melting it, and it releases toxic compounds that can be bad to breathe in. These compounds can irritate your eyes, they can make you feel sick, they can give you a headache, they can actually mess with your gastrointestinal system. So you definitely want to make sure that, again, you're getting that ventilation that we're going to talk about. This is why I always recommend you get a DTF curing oven, because this basically takes this particular problem and gets rid of it for the most part. An oven has a lid and a charcoal filter, and some even vent outside, which means that you're not breathing in any of the fumes as that adhesive melts. So those are the risks of DTF printing. So now let's talk about ways we can mitigate those risks so we are not putting our bodies and our family's bodies in such danger. The first step is with equipment. So I mentioned the curing oven, but if you're using something like the Prestige A4, which is a very popular at-home DTF printer, they also make an enclosed shaker oven. So this basically shakes that powder onto the DTF print after it's coming out of the printer. It shakes it on there in an enclosed area. And for me, this is like a game changer, because if you are doing all of that shaking in an enclosed area, there is much less chance that powder is going to go everywhere. Then after it is powdered, it goes directly into the curing oven, which is filtered with a charcoal filter. So you're taking away basically two of the big problems here that you have with DTF printing. You are shaking in an enclosed area and you're curing in an oven. That means you're not being exposed to nearly as much powder and you're not being exposed to the fumes during the curing process. You do, however, still have to fill the shaker, which means that you will be getting some of that TPU powder into the air, and so you do want to continue to take some of these other precautions that I'm going to talk about. Of course, something like this is not cheap. It's an extra maybe $2,000 on top of the printer itself. However, if you really do want to get into DTF printing in your own home, this might be an investment you want to make. Next, we're going to talk about ventilation. So we talked a little bit about ventilation when we talked about pressing DTF prints, but when you're printing, you're going to want to take ventilation to like another level. High volume ventilation is going to be the number one thing that you can do to limit your exposure to that TPU powder and other fumes that are in the DTF process. The baseline that you want is a high quality, high velocity fan blowing air out of your space and into the outside. So not blowing into any other part of your house, of course, but whether you have it set in a window or a door, you definitely want something that is moving air from inside your craft space to the outside. I really think that maybe doing your DTF printing in a garage or a shed that has a big door is probably the best bet, because that is not inside your home. Open that garage door, have your big fan blowing air out. Think of it sort of like a wood shop, right? If you have a bunch of sanding dust, you don't want that in your lungs or in your house. You want to be blowing it out. Most importantly, you really want to be able to feel a breeze with that fan. If you're not feeling the air moving, the air is probably not moving. So you want to make sure that you can feel that air moving with that fan. You may also want to have a fan on the opposite side of your craft space, blowing fresh air in and blowing the bad air out. You want to basically feel a cross breeze. This will ensure that you are actually removing all of that TPU powder and all of those fumes from your craft space. Note that an air purifier is a good thing to have on hand because it does help remove some of those toxins from the air. However, it doesn't move enough air in the situation to actually make a difference. You really do need something like a fan blowing air and creating a cross breeze. Another thing you're going to want to do is limit access to basically your DTF crafting. So if you have kids or pets, maybe put a lock on the door, lock up your TPU powder. You don't want your kids playing in that stuff. You just want to make sure that you and only you have access to everything you need to do for DTF printing to keep everybody in your household safe. Then, of course, we have PPE, which is, after 2020, a acronym that we all know, personal protective equipment. So you're going to want a tight-fitting N95 mask or even a respirator. This will keep all of the dust from going into your lungs. A surgical mask is not enough because it is open on the sides and you can actually get some, dust in there. Surgical masks are made more for stuff coming out of your mouth, so, a surgeon is not spitting into a patient. However, you are probably going to want to get something like an N95 mask that has the full fit around your face so that you can make sure that you're not getting any of that dust in your lungs. And then again, that mask is not going to stop the fumes from the solvent ink or the curing process, which is why you really need to focus on that ventilation as well. In addition to the mask, add eye protection. So when I was doing DTF printing out at Heat Transfer Warehouse, I had a pair of safety glasses, but they didn't really have any sort of seal. So I went on Amazon and they make lots of types of glasses that actually have a seal. So you'll want to get a pair of safety glasses that have that gasket or that seal around the edge so that the powder's not getting into your eyes. You'll also want to wear disposable gloves. And then for what you're wearing, you may want something like a disposable gown or even a gown that you can wash as long as you're not tracking that through your house. Again, any TPU powder that's on the gown will basically fall off and into your home. So you may want to put it in a plastic bag and put it right in the washing machine. Basically, you want clothes that are just for DTF printing and not for anything else that you're going to be doing. One thing I wish I had when I was out at Heat Transfer Warehouse was some sort of hair covering. So the DTF powder definitely got in my hair, which means that I tracked it back to our little Airbnb on our way home. It got in the rental car just because it was in my hair. So if you have long hair or any hair really, maybe if you're bald, you don't have to do this, but you basically want to cover your hair because that powder will just basically sit in your hair and it can get really gritty and gross. Then once you're done DTF printing for the day, make sure you clean your workspace really well. One thing you might want to do is Swiffer the floors or mop the floors because that TPU powder will probably be on the floor as well and you don't want to track it into your home. So those are the precautions I would take if I was doing DTF printing in my own home. Is it overkill? Maybe, but honestly, I am definitely at the point in my life where I would rather be safe than sorry. I'm very concerned about the risks of DTF printing when it comes to kids in particular. If you want to make stupid choices for yourself, you can. It's your health, it's in your hands. But your kids can't make those choices. So if you're doing DTF printing in the dining room where they eat and they play, you're putting your kids at a completely unnecessary risk. Their lungs are still developing, so don't put their health or your health at risk by sort of minimizing the problems that you might have with DTF printing. My friend Daniel said to think about it sort of like asbestos. One interaction with asbestos is probably not going to cause you long-term problems. One instance with TPU powder is probably not going to cause you long-term problems. However, repeated exposure to TPU powder is going to start to cause issues with your lungs and other parts of your body, and it's just not worth it. My own grandfather actually died from asbestos exposure, so this is something that I feel actually very closely to my heart, and I appreciated the metaphor. You just want to make sure that you're taking all of these safety precautions so that DTF printing doesn't put you in the hospital or worse. I hope you found this video on DTF safety helpful and not too scary. While there's no way to eliminate every risk, you can definitely mitigate and lower all of the risks to make this process much safer. If you have any questions or comments, of course, leave those below. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up. Follow my channel for more DTF, cricket, and sublimation content. I'll see you next time.